fluorescent lights in the convenience store flickered as Ethan Matthews restocked the bottom shelf, his knees protesting against the cold linoleum. Midnight shift, again. His third job this month, each one paying less than the last, each one a little further from the career he'd built over 15 years as a maintenance supervisor at Horizon Industries. "Daddy, my tummy hurts." Lila's voice crackled through his phone. Small and afraid, Ethan's hands stilled on a box of cereal. "Baby, did you take your medicine?" "The bottle's empty." He closed his eyes. The prescription had run out 3 days ago. Without insurance, refilling it meant choosing between medication and groceries. He'd chosen groceries. Now his 7-year-old daughter was paying the price. "I'll be home in 2 hours, sweetheart. Mrs. Chen is right next door if you need anything, okay?" After the call ended, Ethan sat back on his heels, staring at the rows of brightly colored packages. 6 months ago, he'd had a salary, benefits, and a future. Then Clara Westbrook took over as CEO of Horizon Industries. Young, brilliant, ruthless. Her first act was restructuring corporate speak for mass layoffs. Ethan's entire department vanished overnight, along with the health insurance that had been keeping his daughter's chronic condition manageable. The termination letter had been clinical, signed with her neat signature. No explanation, no severance beyond the legal minimum, just efficiency. His manager's shaking hand as she delivered the news. "I'm sorry, Ethan." Orders from the top. Now he worked 3 part-time jobs, none offering benefits. Their apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up in a building that should have been condemned years ago. The elevator never worked. The heating was temperamental, but it was home, and it was what he could afford. "Hey, Matthews." His supervisor barked from the counter. "Those shelves aren't going to stock themselves." Ethan pushed himself up, ignoring the sharp pain in his lower back, a souvenir from a construction gig 2 weeks ago. He'd learned not to complain. Complaining got you replaced. The store's automatic doors whooshed open, admitting a gust of October wind and a woman in an expensive coat. She moved through the aisles like she owned them, selecting items without checking prices. Ethan glanced at her, then away. That kind of casual wealth felt obscene when he was counting pennies for his daughter's medicine. When his shift ended at 6 in the morning, Ethan walked the 40 minutes home, saving the bus fare. The city was waking up, delivery trucks rumbling. Early commuters, clutching coffee cups. Street cleaners finishing their rounds. He'd once been one of those commuters, showered and pressed, heading to a job that mattered. Mrs. Chen was already awake when he climbed the stairs. Her door opened a crack. "She cried for an hour," the elderly woman said, her English halting but kind. "I gave her warm milk." "I hope that's okay." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. I'll pay you back." She waved him off. "You helped me fix my sink last month. We're even." Inside their apartment, Lila was curled on the couch, wrapped in every blanket they owned. The radiator had given up again. Ethan knelt beside her, pressing his lips to her forehead. Warm, but not feverish. Small mercies. "Hey, little bug." Her eyes opened, gray like his own. "You smell like plastic wrap. Occupational hazard." He tucked the blanket tighter around her. "How about pancakes?" "We don't have pancake mix. We have flour, eggs, and sugar." "That's all pancakes really are just dressed up." She smiled, and for a moment, the weight on his chest eased. This was why he did it. Every degrading job, every sleepless night, every swallowed pride, it was all for this smile. While Lila ate her improvised pancakes, Ethan filled out applications on his cracked smartphone. Property maintenance positions. Building supervisor roles. Anything that might lead back to stability. Most required references. He listed his old manager at Horizon Industries, hoping she'd remember him kindly despite the circumstances of his departure. "Daddy?" Lila's fork scraped against her plate. "Are we poor?" The question hit harder than any physical blow. "We're managing." "Baby." Jenny at school said poor people don't have new shoes. She looked down at her sneakers, the ones he'd bought at a thrift store, and scrubbed until they looked almost new. "These aren't new." Ethan set down his phone. "Come here." She climbed into his lap, all bony elbows and knees. He wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the scent of cheap shampoo and child-sweet skin. Listen to me. Having money doesn't make someone better. Being kind does. Being brave does. Helping people even when it's hard, that's what matters. He tilted her chin up. Your shoes might not be new, but they're clean, and they fit, and they'll take you everywhere you need to go. And you know what else? What? The woman who gave me those shoes donated them because her daughter outgrew them. That means somewhere out there, another little girl is walking around in shoes her parents bought new. And maybe she's learning to be generous like her mom. That's a good thing, Lila. That connects us to people. She thought about this. Her face serious. So we're not poor. We're connected? Exactly. He kissed the top of her head. We're rich in connections. It was a pretty lie, but she was 7. She deserved pretty lies. His phone buzzed. A text from his buddy Marcus. Got a gig tonight. Overnight security at some fundraiser downtown. $200 cash. You in? Ethan's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He'd promised Lila he'd be home tonight. They were supposed to watch a movie together, their Friday tradition, but $200 was medication money. It was a working radiator. It was breathing room. I'm in, he typed. Change of plans, bug. Mrs. Chen is going to make you dinner tonight, okay? Lila's face fell, but she nodded. She'd learned not to argue, and that broke his heart more than anything. Clara Westbrook stood in her corner office on the 42nd floor, watching the city sprawl beneath her like a circuit board. From this height, people were dots. Problems were data points. Decisions were algorithms. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman who'd earned her position through merit and ruthlessness in equal measure. 34 years old, CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Featured in business magazines with headlines like The New Face of Corporate Leadership and How Clara Westbrook Saved Horizon Industries. Saved. The word tasted like copper. Your car is ready, Miss Westbrook. Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. The Riverside Foundation fundraiser starts at 7. Clara didn't move. Below, the city prepared for evening lights winking on, traffic beginning its rush hour crawl. Somewhere down there, the people she'd laid off were finishing their shifts at whatever jobs they'd found. Did they think of her? Did they curse her name? She'd received death threats after the restructuring. Security had to escort her to her car for weeks. One letter had been particularly vivid, describing in detail what the writer would do if they ever met her in person. The police had traced it to a former middle manager who'd worked at Horizon for 20 years. He'd lost his house. His wife had left him. Now he was facing charges for terroristic threats. Clara had felt nothing reading that letter. Just calculated the risk, adjusted her security protocol, and moved on. That was the problem. She felt nothing. Miss Westbrook, I'm coming. The fundraiser was an obligation, not a choice. Riverside Foundation focused on housing security for low-income families. The irony wasn't lost on her spending an evening in a luxury venue, eating expensive food, writing checks to help people whose situations she'd arguably contributed to. But optics mattered. CEOs were expected to be philanthropic. Her driver navigated through rush hour with practiced efficiency, delivering her to the Riverside Community Center downtown. The venue was modest by fundraiser standards, a converted warehouse in what had been, until recently, a declining neighborhood. Now it was up and coming, which meant developers were displacing longtime residents with luxury condos and artisanal coffee shops. Inside, the space had been transformed with string lights and draped fabric, making exposed brick and ductwork look intentionally industrial chic. 100 guests mingled, champagne glasses catching the warm light. Clara recognized several faces, board members, executives, politicians, the people who ran the city, pretending for one night to care about the people the city ran over. Clara, so glad you could make it. Richard Paulson, the foundation's director, pumped her hand enthusiastically. He was the kind of nonprofit leader who wore expensive suits and had a corner office, the kind who took home a six-figure salary while asking for donations. Wouldn't miss it. Clara lied smoothly. The evening proceeded according to script, speeches about community and dignity. A video montage of families helped by the foundation, their faces grateful and slightly desperate. Clara wrote a check with 4 zeros and smiled for the photographer. Around 9, she excused herself, needing air and silence. The building had a second-floor offices for the community center's staff. She found an empty conference room and closed the door, leaning against it. Her phone buzzed. A message from her father. Saw the news about the quarterly earnings. Well done. That was it. No, how are you? Or let's have dinner. Just acknowledgement of professional achievement. Her father had built Horizon Industries from nothing, then retired when his health declined, leaving her the company and the mandate to keep it profitable. She'd succeeded. The stock price was up. Shareholders were happy. But late at night, alone in her penthouse apartment, Clara sometimes wondered what she'd sacrificed for that success. She thought of the restructuring. The numbers had been clear. The company was bloated, inefficient, hemorrhaging money. The layoffs had been necessary, logical. She'd saved the company and preserved hundreds of other jobs in the process. So why did she wake up at 3 in the morning, remembering the faces of people being escorted out by security? Why did she sometimes hear crying in the elevator, only to turn and find herself alone? A smell interrupted her thoughts. Acrid. Wrong. Clara opened the conference room door and froze. Smoke was seeping through the hallway, gray tendrils curling along the ceiling like searching fingers. Fire, someone shouted from downstairs. Everyone out. She moved toward the stairs, but the smoke was thicker there, black and choking. The lights flickered once, twice, then died. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in hellish red. Clara turned back, searching for another exit, but the hallway had become a maze in the darkness and smoke. Her eyes watered, her throat closed. She stumbled into a different room, another conference space, and slammed the door, buying herself seconds. Through the window, she could see people evacuating below, pouring onto the street. Fire trucks were arriving, their sirens dopplering through the walls. She tried the window, but it was painted shut, decades of neglect sealing it closed. The smoke was finding her, seeping under the door. Clara pulled off her jacket, stuffing it against the gap. But it wasn't enough. The room was filling with gray haze. She could hear crackling now, the hungry sound of fire consuming the building's old wood and paper. She pulled out her phone. No signal. The fire must have taken out the cell tower or the building's infrastructure. For the first time in years, Clara felt something visceral and undeniable. Terror. She was going to die here, alone, in a building full of people she'd been pretending to help. There was a poetry to it that would have made her laugh if she could breathe. The door handle glowed orange with heat. Fire was in the hallway now, eating toward her. Clara backed against the window, coughing, her vision dimming at the edges. This was it. This was how Clara Westbrook ended, not in a boardroom or a hospital bed, but choking on smoke in a community center, her last thought a bitter acknowledgement that she'd wasted her life on numbers that meant nothing. Then she heard it, a voice, rough and commanding, cutting through the roar of flames. "Is anyone up here?" Ethan had arrived at the community center at 6:30, giving himself time to familiarize himself with the building before the event started. The security supervisor, a bored man named Dale, had given him a quick walkthrough. "Mostly you just stand by the door and look official," Dale said. "Rich people like seeing security. Makes them feel safe." So Ethan stood. He watched expensive cars disgorge expensive people. He nodded politely when they glanced his way. He thought about the $200 he'd earn and how far it would stretch. At 9:47 p.m., the lights flickered. Ethan looked up, frowning. Electrical issues in old buildings were common, but something about the quality of the flicker irregular. Struggling. set off alarms in his head. 15 years as a maintenance supervisor had given him an instinct for building problems. Dale, when was this place last inspected? The supervisor shrugged. Above my pay grade, man. The lights flickered again. And this time Ethan smelled it. The distinctive scent of burning insulation. Sharp and chemical. He moved toward the stairs, following his nose. In the basement stairwell, he saw smoke wisping through the crack beneath a utility door. "We've got a fire." He pulled out his phone, dialing 911 while running back upstairs. Electrical fire in the basement. People were slow to react at first, looking around confused. Then, someone screamed, "Fire!" And the careful social order disintegrated into panic. Dale was herding people toward the exits, doing his job adequately if not heroically. Ethan did a quick scan of the ground floor. People were getting out. The exits were clear. He was turning to leave himself when he heard it. A muffled sound from upstairs. Could have been the building settling, but could have been something else. "Everyone out?" He shouted to Dale. "I think so, wait." One of the organizers went upstairs earlier. The smoke was thicker now, rolling across the ceiling in black waves. Every instinct Ethan had screamed at him to get out. The building was old, dry, packed with combustibles. It would go up fast, but that sound. That might be nothing. Might be someone's sound. He thought of Lila, who'd be orphaned if he died here. He thought of the promises he'd made to himself about staying safe, about being there for her. Then he thought about another night, 2 years ago, when he'd been home with his daughter while his wife died in a hospital because they couldn't afford the right treatment. He'd been safe then. He'd made the practical choice. He'd lived with that choice every day since. "Call the fire department again," Ethan told Dale. "Tell them someone might be trapped on the second floor." Then, before he could reconsider, he ran toward the stairs. The heat hit him like a physical force. The stairwell was an oven, the smoke so thick he immediately lost his bearings. Ethan dropped to a crouch where the air was marginally clearer and pulled his shirt over his nose and mouth. It wouldn't help much, but it was something. He crawled up the stairs, each breath a knife in his lungs. The building groaned around him. Old wood and metal, expanding and warping in the heat. Somewhere below, glass-shattered windows blowing out from the pressure. At the top of the stairs, the hallway was an apocalypse. Flames licked along one wall, consuming decades-old wallpaper and paint. The emergency lighting cast everything in demonic red. Ethan could barely see 3 feet in front of him. "Is anyone up here?" His voice came out as a croak. He tried again, louder. "Is anyone up here?" For a moment, nothing. Then faint, almost lost in the fire's roar, a response. "Help, I'm in here." Ethan followed the voice to a conference room door. The handle was already hot, but he wrapped his hand in his shirt and tried it. Locked. Of course it was locked. These old buildings had doors that locked automatically when closed. "Stand back from the door." He reared back and kicked just below the handle. Pain exploded through his leg, but the door held. Second kick. Third. On the fourth, the frame splintered, and the door crashed inward. Smoke poured out in a black column. Inside, barely visible, a figure huddled by the window. Ethan grabbed the person, a woman. He registered and pulled her toward the door. She was coughing violently, barely conscious. He got an arm around her waist and half carried, half dragged her into the hallway. The stairs were their only option, but the smoke was even thicker now, a solid wall of blackness. Ethan couldn't see his hand in front of his face. He kept one hand on the wall, navigating by touch, the woman a dead weight against his side. Halfway down the stairs, she went limp. "No, no, no. Stay with me." Ethan shifted his grip, lifting her in a firefighter's carry. His legs screamed in protest. The smoke was in his lungs now, thick and poisonous. Each breath was agony. He missed a step in the darkness and fell, tumbling down several stairs with the woman still in his arms. He twisted at the last second, taking the impact on his shoulder and back, protecting her head. pain, darkness at the edges of his vision, the roar of the fire growing louder, coming closer. Get up. You have to get up. Lila needs you. This woman needs you. Ethan pushed himself to his knees, then his feet. He could see light ahead, the exit, impossibly far away. He staggered toward it. The woman draped across his arms like a broken doll. 5 steps. 4. 3. Behind him, something massive gave way with a grinding crash. A wave of heat pushed him forward, singeing his hair. 2 steps. 1. Then hands were grabbing him, pulling them both out into the cold night air. Ethan's legs gave out, and he collapsed on the sidewalk. The woman still clutched against his chest. "We've got them." "Medic." Someone was shouting. Ethan tried to respond, but his throat was raw meat. He rolled onto his side, coughing so hard he thought his ribs might crack. Paramedics swarmed over them, separating him from the woman, fitting an oxygen mask over his face. Through the haze, he watched them work on her, checking vitals, securing a cervical collar, loading her onto a gurney. She was alive. They'd both made it out. Ethan closed his eyes, the adrenaline draining away and leaving only pain and exhaustion. In the distance, fire engines screamed. The building was fully involved now. Flames shooting from the windows like accusations. He'd saved someone. Whoever she was, she'd live to see tomorrow because he'd run into a burning building instead of running away. Maybe that made up for something. Maybe not, but it was better than nothing. The hospital was too bright and too quiet. All fluorescent lights and hushed voices. Ethan sat on an examination table in the emergency department, letting a nurse clean and bandage the burns on his hands. They weren't serious, mostly first-degree, with a few second-degree patches where he'd grabbed the door handle. "You're lucky," the nurse said, not unkindly. "Another minute in there, and we'd be having a different conversation." Lucky. Ethan didn't feel lucky. He felt like he'd been hit by a truck, then dragged behind it for several miles. Every breath hurt. His shoulder was probably dislocated from the fall, and somewhere across town, his 7-year-old daughter was waking up to find him gone. "I need to make a phone call." The nurse nodded toward his phone, which someone had retrieved from his pocket. The screen was cracked, new damage, adding to old, but it still worked. Mrs. Chen answered on the first ring. "Ethan, where are you?" Lila woke up crying. "I'm okay. I'm at St. Michael's Hospital. There was a fire at the job site. Can you stay with her until I get home?" A sharp intake of breath. Of course. Are you hurt?" "Nothing serious. I'll be home in a few hours." He ended the call before she could ask more questions. Through the curtain dividing his cubicle from the rest of the emergency department, he could hear doctors and nurses moving with urgent purpose. Someone coding, someone else being prepped for surgery. The controlled chaos of a Friday night in a city hospital. "Mr. Matthews?" A doctor appeared, clipboard in hand. "I'm Dr. Singh. I understand you're the one who went into the burning building. Is she okay?" "The woman I pulled out? She's stable. Smoke inhalation, mild burns, but she'll recover. You saved her life." Dr. Singh studied him with something like curiosity. That was incredibly brave. Also incredibly stupid. Ethan almost laughed. But it turned into a cough that brought tears to his eyes. "You've got significant smoke inhalation yourself," the doctor continued. "I want to keep you overnight for observation. Your oxygen saturation is low, and there's risk of complications. I can't afford an overnight stay, and I need to get home to my daughter. Mr. Matthews, I'm signing out AMA. Against medical advice." Ethan knew the drill. "Just tell me what to watch for." Dr. Singh's expression suggested this argument wasn't worth having. He rattled off warning signs, difficulty breathing, chest pain, confusion, and made Ethan sign several forms acknowledging that he was an idiot who deserved whatever happened next. Ethan was pulling on his smoke-damaged shirt when a nurse poked her head through the curtain. The woman you saved is asking to see you. She's in Bay 7. Something in Ethan's chest tightened. He didn't want gratitude. He didn't want to be anyone's hero. He just wanted to go home, hold his daughter, and forget this night ever happened. But the nurse was waiting, and it would be rude to refuse. Bay 7 was 3 curtains down. Ethan walked slowly, his body filing formal complaints with every step. Through the gap in the curtain, he could see a figure on the bed, oxygen cannula in her nose. Her expensive dress replaced with a hospital gown. He pushed the curtain aside. The woman turned her head toward him. And for a moment, time fractured. He knew that face. He'd seen it in newspapers and business magazines. He'd seen it in his nightmares, attached to the signature on his termination letter. Clara Westbrook, CEO of Horizon Industries. The woman who destroyed his life was staring at him with recognition dawning in her smoke-reddened eyes. "You," she whispered. Ethan stood frozen, his mind unable to process the cosmic joke fate had just played. Of all the people in that building, of all the lives he could have saved, it had to be hers. "You were my maintenance supervisor." Her voice was hoarse from smoke. "Ethan Matthews, right?" He should have left her. The thought came unbidden and vicious. He should have walked past that room, should have let the fire have her. She'd shown him no mercy. Why should he have shown her any? But he had. He'd risked his life. Might have orphaned his daughter. For someone who'd casually ruined him with a stroke of her pen. "Mr. Matthews, one." She broke off, coughing. When she recovered, her eyes were wet. "Thank you. You saved my life." Ethan stood there, looking at her. Really looking at her for the first time. She was younger than he'd imagined. Somehow more human in the harsh hospital light. Vulnerable. Her perfectly styled hair was singed and tangled. Her manicured nails were broken. She looked small in the hospital bed, nothing like the titan who'd held his future in her hands. "Why?" Clara asked. "Why would you save me, after what I did to you?" It was a good question. Ethan didn't have a good answer. "I didn't know it was you," he said finally. His voice came out flat, empty of inflection. "I just heard someone calling for help, but if you had known, I don't know." And that was the truth. He genuinely didn't know if he would have gone into that room if he'd known who was inside. The thought made him feel sick. It doesn't matter. You're alive. That's what matters. Clara was crying now, silent tears cutting tracks through the soot on her face. "I'm sorry. For what I did to you. To all of you. I'm so sorry. Sorry." One word, 6 letters. Completely inadequate for the magnitude of what she'd taken from him. But looking at her face, Ethan saw something he hadn't expected. Genuine remorse. Whether it was guilt over the layoffs or just trauma from nearly dying, he couldn't tell. Maybe it didn't matter. "I have to go," he said. "My daughter is waiting." He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Please, let me help you. Let me make this right." Ethan looked back. "You can't make it right, Miss Westbrook. Some things can't be fixed with money. Then tell me what I can do. Live better than you have been." He met her eyes. "That's all. Just be better." Then he walked out, leaving her alone with her gratitude and her guilt. Clara was discharged from the hospital at dawn. Her assistant had brought clean clothes and handled the paperwork with efficient discretion. By 7 a.m., Clara was in her penthouse apartment, standing under a shower hot enough to hurt, scrubbing away the smell of smoke. The water couldn't touch what she was feeling. Ethan Matthews had saved her life. The man she'd destroyed had pulled her from a burning building, had risked his own life for hers without hesitation. And when she tried to thank him, when she'd apologized, he'd looked at her with such exhaustion that she'd felt something crack in her chest. "Live better than you have been." Clara turned off the water and stood dripping on the marble tile, looking at her reflection in the steam-fogged mirror. Who was she? What had she become? She'd built her identity around strength, decisiveness, rationality. She'd never second-guessed her choices. Successful people didn't dwell on the past. They moved forward, always forward. But now, looking at herself, she saw someone else. Someone who'd traded humanity for profit margins. Someone who'd convinced herself that casualties were just the cost of doing business. Her phone rang her father. Clara ignored it. She couldn't talk to him right now, couldn't pretend everything was fine when her entire sense of self was crumbling. She dressed mechanically silk blouse, tailored slacks, the armor of success, but her hands were shaking. The burns on her palms were minor, already bandaged and forgotten. Ethan's hands had been worse. She'd seen the angry red flesh when he'd held his phone to call home. He'd gone home to a daughter. Clara had gone home to an empty apartment, with designer furniture, and a view that cost more than most people made in a year. The inequity of it was obscene. On impulse, Clara opened her laptop and pulled up Ethan's personnel file. It was still in the system, marked as terminated. She read through his employment history. 15 years of exemplary service, multiple commendations, employee of the quarter 3 times. His supervisor had written, "Ethan is the backbone of this department. Letting him go would be catastrophic." Clara had let him go anyway. She'd looked at numbers, not names. She'd seen a budget item, not a person. Further digging revealed more. Ethan's wife had died 18 months before the layoffs. Pancreatic cancer, discovered too late. The hospital bills had been enormous, even with insurance. After the layoffs, Ethan had lost that insurance. His daughter had a chronic condition, nothing life-threatening, but requiring regular medication and monitoring. Clara closed the laptop and pressed her palms against her eyes. She'd done this. Her efficiency, her rationality, her cold calculations, they'd created this man's suffering. And when faced with a chance for revenge, when he'd held her life in his hands, he'd saved her. Be better. By noon, Clara had made 3 decisions. First, she contacted her private investigator, a man she normally used for corporate due diligence, and asked him to find Ethan's current address discreetly. Second, she cleared her afternoon schedule, ignoring her assistant's protests about the board meeting and the quarterly review. Third, she went shopping. Not at the boutiques she normally frequented, but at a regular pharmacy and grocery store. The kind of places she hadn't entered in years. She bought children's medicine, groceries, practical things that a struggling father might need. The investigator came through within an hour. Ethan lived in a 4th-floor walk-up in Riverside, the same neighborhood as the community center. The same neighborhood Clara had been raising money to help. The irony was not lost on her. She drove herself, dismissing her driver. The building was worse than she'd imagined: crumbling brick, broken windows, graffiti on the ground floor. Inside, the hallway smelled like mildew and desperation. Clara climbed the stairs, her designer heels echoing on concrete. By the 4th floor, she was breathing hard, not from exertion but from emotion she couldn't name. She knocked on apartment 4C. The door opened to reveal an elderly Asian woman, her face creased with suspicion. "Yes? I'm looking for Ethan Matthews. He's sleeping." "Night shift." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" Clara opened her mouth to give her standard introduction. "Clara Westbrook, CEO," then stopped. That name, that identity, suddenly felt like a barrier. "I'm a friend. From last night." The fire. Recognition flickered across the woman's face. "You're the one he saved." "Yes." Clara held up the grocery bags. "I brought some things." "For his daughter." The woman studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. "He needs sleep. Don't wake him." "But the little one is in the kitchen." Clara entered a space smaller than her penthouse closet. The apartment was clean but shabby, everything worn and carefully maintained. Children's drawings covered one-wall crayon renderings of houses and flowers, and people holding hands. In the kitchen, a little girl sat at a folding table, coloring. She looked up as Clara entered, gray eyes curious in a small, serious face. "Hi," the girl said. Are you Daddy's friend? Clara set the bags on the counter, her throat tight. Yes. My name is Clara. I'm Lila. She held up her drawing a princess with an elaborate dress. Do you like it? It's beautiful. Daddy says I'm a good artist. He says maybe I'll be famous someday. Clara crouched down to Lila's level, suddenly desperate to be smaller, less imposing. I'm sure he's right. Are you here to give Daddy a job? Lila asked, with the brutal directness of childhood. He needs a real job so he doesn't have to work 3 places. Clara's voice failed. She'd come here to help, to assuage her guilt with groceries and maybe money. But looking at this child, at the hopeful trust in her eyes, Clara understood the magnitude of what she'd destroyed. This wasn't about jobs and economics. It was about a little girl who'd lost her mother and was watching her father work himself to death. It was about bedtimes missed and medicines unaffordable and dreams deferred. It was about the human cost of corporate efficiency. I'm going to try, Clara said, and meant it with an intensity that surprised her. I'm going to try very hard to help your dad. Lila considered this, then went back to her coloring. Okay. Do you want to color with me? I have extra crayons. So Clara sat on a rickety chair in a tiny kitchen in a building she would normally have condemned, and colored pictures with a 7-year-old girl, while her father slept off the effects of saving his destroyer's life. And for the first time in years, Clara felt something like peace. Ethan woke at 4 in the afternoon, his body screaming. For a moment, he didn't remember why everything hurt. Then it came rushing back. The fire, the smoke. Clara Westbrook's face pale with recognition. He dragged himself out of bed and into the bathroom, examining the damage in the mirror. His face was streaked with soot he'd missed in the hospital. His hands were bandaged. Bruises were blooming across his shoulder and ribs like dark flowers. But he was alive, and so was she. He found Lila in the kitchen with Mrs. Chen, who was making dinner from groceries that definitely hadn't been in their apartment that morning. Where did all this come from? Your friend brought it, Lila said cheerfully. Clara. She's nice. She colored with me. Ethan's stomach dropped. Clara was here? This morning, Mrs. Chen gestured to the overflowing counter. Brought medicine, food, other things. I told her you were sleeping. She sat with Lila for an hour. The older woman's expression was unreadable. She cried when she saw the apartment. Perfect. Now Clara Westbrook had seen exactly how far he'd fallen. Ethan wanted to be angry about the invasion of privacy, but mostly he felt tired. So deeply tired. Over the next week, evidence of Clara's guilt accumulated. A check arrived enough to cover 3 months' rent. An anonymous payment covered Lila's medical bills. Then came a job offer. Maintenance supervisor at a property management company. Full benefits. Salary twice what he'd made at Horizon Industries. Ethan tore up the check, returned the job offer, and tried to pretend none of it had happened. But Clara wasn't easily dismissed. She appeared at the convenience store where he worked nights, buying nothing, just standing in the aisle until he acknowledged her. Stop, he said. Whatever you think you're doing, stop. I'm trying to help. You're trying to buy forgiveness. It doesn't work that way. Clara flinched, but didn't leave. Then tell me how it does work. Tell me what I can do. Nothing. There's nothing you can do for me. He turned away, restocking shelves with mechanical precision. Go run your company. Make your profits. Just leave us alone. I can't. Something in her voice made him look back. She was crying quiet tears that she didn't bother to hide. I see your face every time I close my eyes, she said. You and everyone else I hurt. I convinced myself it was just business, that I was doing what had to be done. But it wasn't business. It was people's lives, and I destroyed them because I couldn't see past spreadsheets. And now you can? One near-death experience and suddenly you're enlightened? No. Her honesty surprised him. I don't know what I am, but I know I can't go back to being who I was. You asked me to be better. I'm trying. I need you to let me try. Ethan wanted to refuse. Wanted to nurture his anger. To use it as armor against her wealth and power, and the terrible vulnerability of accepting help. But he thought of Lila, coloring at the kitchen table, asking when they could afford new crayons. He thought of the medicine bottles he'd been rationing, the debt piling up, the exhaustion that made his bones ache. Pride was a luxury he couldn't afford. Fine, he said, but not for me, for everyone you hurt. Clara's head snapped up. What do you mean? You want to make things right? Then make things right. Not just with me, but with all of us. Every person you laid off, every family you disrupted, help them. Really help them, not just write a check and feel better. How? Ethan had been thinking about this since that night in the hospital, letting his anger crystallize into something more productive. Create a fund, jobs program, retraining, healthcare assistance, hire people to help people, and not some corporate charity that's really just a tax write-off. Actually do something. He could see her mind working, already calculating logistics and costs. The CEO reasserting itself over the guilty woman. I'll do it, she said, but I want your help. My help? You know what people need. You've lived it. I need someone who can tell me when I'm wrong, who won't let me turn this into another efficiency project. She met his eyes. Please. It was the please that got him. Clara Westbrook, who ordered people around for a living, was asking. Actually, asking. I'll think about it, Ethan said. He thought about it for 3 days. Then he called the number she'd left. 2 weeks later, the Phoenix Initiative was announced. A comprehensive program for former Horizon Industries employees. Job placement, healthcare subsidies, retraining grants, childcare assistance. Funded by Clara Westbrook personally, administered by a board that included Ethan and 3 other former employees. The business press called it public relations. The cynics called it guilt money. Ethan called it a start. They worked together in an office Clara had rented in Riverside, deliberately chosen for its symbolism. She'd show up in jeans and a simple sweater, her corporate armor left behind. They'd review applications, argue about priorities, and slowly, carefully, begin to understand each other. Why did you do it? Clara asked one evening, after everyone else had gone home. Why did you save me when you could have left me there? Ethan was quiet for a long time, staring at the stack of applications on his desk, people's lives reduced to paper, just like Clara had once reduced him. Because my daughter was watching, he said finally. Not literally, but in my head. And I thought about what kind of man I wanted to be for her. The kind who helps people, even when they don't deserve it. Especially when they don't deserve it. I didn't deserve it, Clara agreed softly. No, but you're here now, doing this. Maybe that counts for something. She looked at him, and something passed between them, not forgiveness. Not yet, but the possibility of it. The first fragile thread of trust. Thank you, she said. For giving me a chance to be better. Ethan nodded, then stood to leave. At the door, he paused. Clara, that night, in the fire, were you scared? Terrified, she admitted. I thought I was going to die alone. That no one would miss me. That I'd wasted my whole life on things that didn't matter. And now? Now I'm scared of something else. Scared that I'll fail at this. That I'll hurt people again, even trying to help. She looked up at him. But I'm going to try anyway. Good, Ethan said. Fear means you're paying attention. It means you care. He left her there, working late into the night. And for the first time since that night in the fire, he felt something like hope. 3 months into the Phoenix Initiative, reality began to complicate the redemption narrative. Not everyone wanted Clara's help. Some former employees refused to apply out of pride. Others took the assistance, but made their contempt clear. One man spit at her feet during a community meeting. Security had to escort him out, while Clara stood frozen, taking the hatred she'd earned. Ethan watched it all with mixed feelings. Part of him wanted to defend her. She was trying, genuinely trying. But another part remembered his own rage, his own dark nights when he'd fantasized about confronting her. Maybe this was a mistake, Clara said after that meeting. They were alone in the office, the weight of judgment still hanging in the air. Maybe I'm making things worse. You are making things worse, Ethan said bluntly. For some people, seeing you again is like ripping open old wounds. You can't fix that with programs and money. Then what am I supposed to do? Keep going. Keep showing up. Keep trying even when it's hard. He softened slightly. Change isn't instant, Clara. You hurt people. Some of them won't ever forgive you. You have to accept that. She nodded, but he could see it was killing her, this woman who was used to solving problems efficiently, confronted with a problem that had no clean solution. Meanwhile, Lila had adopted Clara with the fierce loyalty of childhood. She'd insist on showing Clara every drawing, every good grade, every small triumph. And Clara, who'd never wanted children, who'd built her life around career and achievement, found herself looking forward to these visits more than board meetings. One Saturday, Clara took Lila to the park, while Ethan worked a shift. They fed ducks, rode the carousel, ate ice cream. Normal things that Clara had never done, even as a child. Her parents had believed in productivity, not play. "Do you like my daddy?" Lila asked suddenly. Ice cream dripping down her cone. Clara nearly choked. "What?" "Mrs. Chen says you look at him like her granddaughter looks at her boyfriend. All soft and silly." I, Clara, had no idea how to respond to that. Did she like Ethan? He infuriated her, challenged her, forced her to confront uncomfortable truths. He was also kind, principled, and devoted to his daughter in a way that made Clara's heart ache. "Your daddy is a good man, the best man," Lila agreed. "Are you going to marry him?" "Lila, that's not, we're just friends." "Okay." She seemed satisfied with that answer. "But if you did marry him, I wouldn't mind. You're nice. And you don't treat me like a baby." Clara felt something break open in her chest. "Thank you, Lila. That means a lot to me." That night, Clara lay in her expensive bed and thought about a little girl who'd lost her mother and a man who'd saved the life of his enemy. She thought about what it meant to be good, to be better, to be worthy of trust. She thought about how she'd trade every achievement, every accolade, every dollar in her bank account for the simple warmth of being welcomed into that tiny apartment, of coloring at a worn kitchen table, of being called nice by a 7-year-old who'd seen more hardship than any child should. The next morning, Clara went to the office early and found Ethan already there, reviewing applications. "I need to tell you something," she said without preamble. He looked up, alert to the tension in her voice. "When I fired you, when I fired all of you, I knew it would hurt people. I calculated the human cost and decided it was acceptable." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "I told myself it was necessary, but the truth is, there were other options. Slower options. Messier options that might have saved more jobs. I chose efficiency because it was easier. Because it made the numbers look better faster. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve the whole truth. Not the sanitized version I've been telling myself." Her hands were shaking. "I didn't just make a hard decision. I made a selfish one. And I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry." Ethan sat back, processing this. "And the Phoenix Initiative? Still genuine, still important. But I need you to know, it doesn't erase what I did. It can't. I'm not doing this to be forgiven. I'm doing it because it's right." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, okay, you're right. Nothing you do will erase the past, but you're also right that this work matters, so we keep going." He paused. "But Clara, thank you for being honest." She nodded, not trusting her voice. They worked in silence for a while, the morning sun streaming through the windows, and Clara realized this was enough. This small, imperfect progress toward being better. This was enough. It started with a phone call at 2 in the morning. Clara was awake, as she often was these days, not from stress, but from a strange sort of peace that made sleep seem unnecessary. "Clara." Ethan's voice was raw, terrified. "I need help." She was out of bed, pulling on clothes before he finished explaining. Fire in his building. Electrical again, spreading fast. He was at the hospital with Lila, who'd inhaled smoke. Mrs. Chen was missing. Clara drove through red lights, her hands tight on the wheel. Not again. Not another fire. Not these people she'd come to, what? Care for? Love? When had that happened? The building was an inferno, worse than the community center. Flames punched through the roof, sparks dancing into the night sky. Fire trucks blocked the street, their lights painting everything in apocalyptic red and blue. Clara found Ethan behind an ambulance, Lila wrapped in a blanket and breathing oxygen. She was awake, crying, calling for Mrs. Chen. She went back in, a firefighter was explaining. Said she had to get her husband's ashes. We couldn't stop her. Then I'm going in, Ethan said, standing. Sir. You can't. That woman is family. I'm going. Clara grabbed his arm. No. You have a daughter. She needs you. Mrs. Chen saved Lila tonight. I owe her. Then let me pay your debt. Clara was already moving toward the building. Your daughter needs you alive. Mine doesn't care if I die. It was the truth, stark and terrible. Clara had no one who would mourn her, no one whose life would be irreparably damaged by her death. Just shareholders and a father who'd call it a strategic loss. Clara, don't. But she was running toward the building, toward the firefighters who tried to stop her. She was smaller, faster, and she'd learned from last time. Stay low. Keep moving. Don't think about the heat or the smoke or the thousand ways this could go wrong. The first floor was chaos, ceiling tiles falling, walls cracking, the building's death throes. Clara covered her mouth with her jacket and pushed deeper, calling for Mrs. Chen. She found her on the second floor, collapsed in a hallway, a small urn clutched to her chest. Clara grabbed the elderly woman under the arms and dragged her toward the stairs. The smoke was thicker here, black and poisonous. Clara's eyes streamed. Her lungs burned. She could feel herself slowing down, her body giving up. No, not now. Not when there's finally someone worth saving. She reached the stairs and half carried, half fell down them, Mrs. Chen's weight dragging them both. At the bottom, firefighters rushed in, taking the older woman and pulling Clara out into the cold air. She collapsed on the sidewalk, coughing so hard she thought she'd break. Oxygen mask. Hands checking her vitals. Voices discussing transport. Through it all, she searched for Ethan, for Lila. They were there, Ethan's face streaked with tears, Lila sobbing against his chest. Mrs. Chen was being loaded into an ambulance. Conscious. Alive. Clara had saved her. She'd run into fire and pulled someone out, just like Ethan had done for her. The symmetry was almost perfect. Ethan knelt beside her. Lila, in his arms. You're insane, he said. But his voice was gentle. Learn from the best. Clara managed between coughs. Mrs. Chen? Lila asked, her voice small. She's okay, baby. She's okay because of Clara. Lila looked at Clara with something like awe. You saved Mrs. Chen. She saved you first. I just returned the favor. The little girl reached out, her small hand finding Clara's bandaged one. You're a hero. Just like Daddy. Clara started crying then. Ugly, grateful tears that had nothing to do with smoke. Ethan's arm came around her shoulders, pulling her close. The three of them huddled together on the sidewalk while the building burned behind them, and Clara understood something fundamental. This was family. Not the family she'd been born into, with their cold efficiency and emotional distance, but the family she'd chosen that had somehow chosen her back. Despite everything, this was what mattered. Not corner offices or stock prices or business magazine covers. This These people. This imperfect, complicated, fierce love that grew from ashes. Thank you, Ethan whispered against her hair. Thank you. Clara just held on to him and Lila, and this moment of belonging, and felt something like redemption. The building was condemned. Everyone who'd lived there needed new housing, including Ethan and Lila. Clara offered her penthouse without thinking, and, to her surprise, Ethan accepted. Just until we find something, he said. They'd been there 3 weeks, and Clara was terrified they'd leave. The penthouse had transformed. Lila's drawings covered the minimalist walls. Ethan's work boots sat by the door. There were dishes in the sink, actual dishes, evidence of real life, not the sterile perfection Clara had maintained. She loved it. One evening, after Lila was asleep in the guest room, Clara and Ethan sat on the balcony, watching the city lights. I need to tell you something, Ethan said. Clara's heart stuttered. Here it came, the announcement that they'd found an apartment, that they were leaving, that this temporary happiness had an expiration date. I've been angry at you for so long, he continued. I used that anger as fuel, as a reason to keep going. But somewhere along the way, it changed. You changed. I'm trying to. Let me finish. He turned to face her, his expression serious. You're not the same person who fired me, and I'm not the same person who got fired. We've both changed, and I think. He paused, searching for words. I think maybe we changed together. What are you saying? I'm saying I forgive you, Clara, completely. And more than that, I'm grateful. Because if none of this had happened, the fire, the Phoenix Initiative, all of it, I never would have met you. The real you, the real me, is the person who hurt you. No. The real you is the person who runs into burning buildings. The person who colors with my daughter. The person who's terrified of failing but tries anyway. He reached out, taking her hand. That's who you are. The rest was just armor. Clara couldn't speak. Couldn't process the enormity of what he was offering. I'm falling in love with you, Ethan said quietly. I fought it. Told myself it was stupid, impossible. But Lila was right. You're nice. You're brave. And you make me want to be better too. I don't deserve. Stop. Stop deciding what you deserve. Just tell me how you feel. How did she feel? Terrified. Grateful. Overwhelmed. And yes, somewhere beneath all that, something warm and growing. I love you, she whispered. I love you, and Lila, and this life we're building from ruins. I love who I'm becoming when I'm with you. Ethan kissed her then, gentle and careful. And Clara felt something she'd never felt before. Home. 6 months later, Clara stood in front of the Horizon Industries board, preparing to detonate her career. I'm stepping down as CEO, she announced. Effective immediately, the room erupted. Protests, questions, accusations of instability. Clara waited for silence. I'm recommending Michael Chen as my replacement, the current CFO, steady and competent. I'll remain as an advisor, but my focus is shifting to the Phoenix Initiative full-time. That charity project? One board member sneered. You're throwing away your career for that? I'm not throwing it away. I'm redirecting it. Clara met each person's eyes in turn. This company survived my restructuring. It'll survive my departure. But the people I hurt, they needed more than survival. They needed someone to care. I'm choosing to be that person. Her father called that night, his voice tight with anger. You've embarrassed the family. Embarrassed yourself. No, Dad. I've finally done something worth being proud of. She hung up before he could respond. Ethan was waiting when she got home. They're home now, officially. He'd bought a partnership in a local property management company. Lila was thriving in a new school. They'd built something real, something lasting. How'd it go? He asked. Key. He studied her face, then smiled. Good. You were getting too corporate again anyway. She laughed, the sound light and free. "Excuse me? I'm running a nonprofit. You started wearing suits again. That's called professionalism. That's called hiding." He pulled her close. "I like you better in jeans." "Noted, Mr. Matthews." Lila ran in then, waving a piece of paper. "Look what I made in art class." It was a painting of two people standing in front of flames, holding hands. At the bottom, in careful letters, "Heroes don't wear suits. They wear hearts on their sleeves." Clara knelt down, pulling Lila into a hug. "It's perfect. You're perfect." "I know," Lila said, matter-of-factly. "Are we having pizza for dinner?" "Absolutely," Ethan said. "What do you think, Clara? Pepperoni or supreme?" "Supreme. Always supreme." They ordered pizza. They ate on paper plates. They played a board game that Lila won by blatantly cheating. They laughed until their sides hurt. And later, after Lila was asleep and Ethan was reading on the couch, Clara stood at the window and looked out at the city that had almost killed them both. She'd been so focused on reaching the top, on proving her worth through achievement and wealth. She'd climbed and climbed, never realizing she was ascending the wrong mountain. The real summit was here, in this moment. In belonging. In being known and loved. Not despite her flaws, but including them. In choosing every day to be better, not for accolades or approval, but because it was right. Her phone buzzed an email from the Phoenix Initiative. Another family housed, another person employed. Small victories. The kind that didn't make headlines, but changed lives. "Come here," Ethan said from the couch, and she went, curling against him like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Saving me that night?" "Every day," he said, then kissed her forehead. "I regret that I almost didn't. That I hesitated. That I thought for even a second about leaving you there. I would have deserved it. No one deserves to burn, Clara. That's the whole point." She thought about that, about fire as metaphor, about destruction and rebirth, about how sometimes you had to lose everything to find what mattered. "I used to think success meant being untouchable," she said. "Being so powerful that nothing could hurt me. And now? Now I think success means being touchable. Being vulnerable enough to hurt. To change. To love." She looked up at him. "Being brave enough to need people. That's definitely success," Ethan agreed. "The kind that actually matters." They sat in comfortable silence, the city glittering below them like promises made of light. Somewhere out there, people were struggling, suffering, surviving. Clara couldn't save them all, but she could save some. She could try. That was enough. That was everything. In the guest room, Lila dreamed of princesses and heroes, of fires tamed and families forged. On her nightstand sat a framed drawing, 3 figures holding hands, flames behind them, smiles on their faces. The caption read, "We rose from the ashes together, and in the morning they would rise again, and again, and again." Not because they were perfect, but because they chose to keep trying. Because that's what heroes do, not the heroes in suits, making decisions from corner offices, but the real heroes, the ones who run into burning buildings, the ones who forgive the unforgivable, the ones who love fiercely and messily and without reservation, the ones who understand that sometimes being saved and saving someone else are the same thing. And sometimes the greatest redemption isn't forgiveness. It's becoming worthy of it,